under the golden hues of the Mindanao sunset, where the waves of Davao's shores whispered secrets to the wind, Amina met the man who would forever change her life. The air was thick with the scent of salt and blooming sampaguita, the national flower of the Philippines, symbolizing purity and undying love, an omen, perhaps, of what was to come. The marketplace was alive with the chatter of merchants selling fresh mangoes, durian, and woven fabrics dyed in the rich colors of the Maranao and Maguindanaon cultures. Amina, a 23-year-old Muslim Filipino woman, had spent her entire life in the structured embrace of her conservative family, where honor and tradition shaped every aspect of life. She was raised to be obedient, to uphold her family's dignity, and to never stray from the path expected of her. Her days were spent studying the Quran, helping her mother prepare meals, and embroidering intricate patterns on traditional malongs. Yet, despite her deep respect for her heritage, she longed for something more, something beyond the confines of what was deemed proper for a woman like her. That longing found its answer in Captain James Carter. He was a 25-year-old American naval officer stationed in Davao, a man who carried the quiet strength of a soldier, yet harbored the soul of a dreamer. He had seen much of the world, from the cold steel docks of San Diego to the ancient streets of Kyoto, but nothing had ever captivated him quite like Amina. She was different. Her presence was serene, her voice like the lull of the ocean before a storm, and her eyes, dark as the night yet filled with the light of unwavering faith, pulled him in like a tide he could not resist. Their first meeting had been accidental, a chance encounter at the bustling wharf when Amina had dropped her woven basket of fruits. James, ever the gentleman, had bent down to help her. Their fingers brushed for only a moment, yet something unspoken passed between them, a spark neither could deny. From that moment on, their paths seemed to cross over and over, as if fate itself had woven them into each other's destinies. For 2 weeks they spent every moment together, stealing glances in crowded streets, exchanging quiet words in hidden corners of the city. They spoke of everything, their dreams, their fears, their beliefs. Amina shared stories of her ancestors, warriors who had fought to defend their homeland. James, in turn, spoke of the stars over the Arizona desert, of the wild horses that ran free in his childhood memories. Their love was like a fleeting dream, intense, pure, yet fragile against the weight of the world. But Amina knew the risks. She knew that if her family discovered their love, there would be consequences. She knew that a future with James would mean leaving behind everything she had ever known. And yet when she was with him, none of that seemed to matter. James, enchanted by her gentle spirit and unwavering faith, knew she was the one. And so, on their last evening together, as the ocean cradled the setting sun, he took her hands in his voice trembling with emotion. "No matter what happens, I will return for you. Wait for me." Amina searched his face, memorizing every detail, the warmth in his smile, the depth in his blue eyes, the way his hand trembled ever so slightly as he held hers. She wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. And so she nodded. "I will wait," she whispered. But fate is often cruel. The next morning, as Amina prepared to meet James at the port to watch the sunrise together, a devastating call shattered their world. James's parents had died in a tragic car accident back in the United States. The news hit him like a wrecking ball, stealing the air from his lungs. His father, his mentor, his guide, was gone. His mother, the woman who had always believed in him, was no more. He had no choice. He had to return home immediately. As he stood before Amina, his heart breaking, he cupped her face in his hands, pressing his forehead against hers in the way she had once told him was a symbol of deep affection in her culture. "I will come back for you," he vowed. "I swear it, Amina, I love you." Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she forced herself to be strong. "Go, James, your family needs you. But I will wait. I will wait for as long as it takes." With one final lingering kiss filled with unspoken love, James turned and walked away, leaving behind the woman who held his heart. Amina watched him disappear into the horizon, whispering a silent prayer. She had faith in his promise. But she had no idea just how long she would have to wait. 4 weeks later, Amina's hands trembled as she held the truth in them. A child was growing inside her. The small, delicate strip in her hand confirmed what her heart had already begun to suspect. She pressed a trembling palm against her belly, her breath hitching as a whirlwind of emotions consumed her: joy, fear, love, and an overwhelming uncertainty. Her thoughts raced to James. Would he be happy? Would he keep his promise? She wanted to believe that somewhere across the ocean he was fighting to return to her, that his absence was not by choice, but by circumstance. But as the days turned into weeks with no word, doubt began to creep into her heart like a shadow she could not shake. Her parents, however, were not willing to wait for explanations. That evening, when Amina finally gathered the courage to tell them, the world she had always known shattered in an instant. Her father's face darkened with fury, his voice shaking the walls of their home. "You have brought disgrace upon this family," he thundered, his hands clenched into fists. Her mother's sobs filled the silence that followed. "How could you?" she whispered, her voice filled with both heartbreak and shame. Amina's knees buckled beneath her as she clutched her belly protectively. "James will return," she pleaded. "He promised." But her words held no weight in the face of their wrath. To them, it did not matter if he had promised her the moon and the stars. He was gone, and she was left behind, tainted and alone. At first, her family kept her hidden, ashamed of what the neighbors might say. She was forbidden to step outside, forbidden to speak of the man she loved. They tried to silence her, tried to break her spirit, but Amina held on to her faith, whispering prayers in the quiet of the night. Months passed with no word from James. As her belly grew, so did the scorn in her household. Her mother, once gentle and warm, now barely looked at her. Her father's disappointment turned to silence, a cold rejection that cut deeper than any insult. Her siblings avoided her gaze, treating her as if she were already a ghost among them. And then, on a stormy night when the sky wept alongside her, she gave birth to a son, Ibrahim. The moment she held him in her arms, all her pain, all her suffering melted away. He was perfect. His tiny fingers curled around hers, his cries filled the empty spaces in her heart. And when she looked into his eyes, she saw James. His deep blue eyes, a striking contrast to her own, held the same quiet strength she had fallen in love with. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to hope. Maybe James would come back tomorrow, or the day after. Maybe he was already on his way. But hope, much like love, was a dangerous thing in a world that refused to wait. As the years passed and no letter arrived, no ship docked with the man she longed for, her parents' patience wore thin. They had tolerated her presence only because of Ibrahim's innocence, but when he turned 4, everything changed. The final straw came one fateful evening. Ibrahim had been playing outside, his laughter filling the air like the song of a bird untouched by sorrow. But when a group of village boys taunted him, "Half-blood, fatherless boy," his small hands clenched into fists, and he fought back. He came home with a split lip and bruised knuckles, and Amina, seeing the pain in his eyes, held him tightly, whispering that everything would be all right. Her father did not share her sentiment. He watched the scene unfold, his face carved from stone. Then, in a voice void of emotion, he said, "This cannot continue. You are no longer my daughter." Amina's heart dropped. "Baba, please." He turned his back to her. Her mother looked away. Her siblings said nothing. And just like that, the last thread of belonging she had was severed. That night, she packed what little she could carry, wrapped Ibrahim in a thin shawl, and stepped out of her home for the last time. The streets became their home. The first nights were the hardest. She clutched Ibrahim close, whispering prayers into the cold wind as they huddled beneath the bridge near the marketplace. Hunger gnawed at her bones, exhaustion weighed on her shoulders, and yet the worst pain came from the stares, the judgment, the whispers that sliced through her like daggers. Foolish girl, still waiting for a man who abandoned her. She deserves this. She shamed her family. Look at her now, nothing but a beggar. She wanted to scream at them, tell them that they were wrong, that James hadn't abandoned her, that he was coming back, that he had promised. But words would not change their cruel hearts. Ibrahim, despite his innocence, felt their cruelty too. Some days he asked about his father, his small voice filled with hope. "Mama, when will he come?" And every time, no matter how much it hurt, Amina would stroke his hair and whisper, "Soon, my love. He promised." Even when the nights grew colder, even when the hunger became unbearable, even when the world mocked her for still believing, because deep in her heart, despite everything, she knew James Carter would return. Years passed, and life had been unkind to Amina. The days blurred together in an endless cycle of hunger and struggle. She worked tirelessly, washing clothes for strangers, selling whatever trinkets she could find, and enduring the scorching sun and relentless rain just to ensure Ibrahim had something to eat. Despite their hardships, she never let despair consume her. She lived for her son, for his laughter, his bright blue eyes that mirrored his father's, and for the quiet moments when he would lay his small head on her lap and whisper, "Mama, will Baba ever come?" And every time she would smile, brushing his dark curls from his forehead. "Yes, my love, he will come, he promised." But as the years dragged on, her once unshakable faith began to waver. What if James had forgotten? What if the world had swallowed him whole, leaving only memories behind? Yet no matter how cruel the whispers of doubt became, she refused to let go. Then, on a fateful afternoon, the air in the bustling marketplace grew heavy with an unspoken tension. A sleek black car, the kind that only the wealthy could afford, pulled up near the marketplace. Conversations died mid-sentence. Children stopped playing. Vendors, who had spent years sneering at Amina's misfortune, fell silent, their curiosity piqued. The car door opened, and from within stepped a man. Tall, strong, his once youthful face now carried the burden of time and sorrow. His piercing blue eyes, eyes that Amina had never forgotten, swept across the marketplace with urgency, searching, hoping. James Carter had finally returned. His heart pounded violently in his chest as he scanned the faces of the crowd, his breath hitching when he spotted her. Amina, standing by the corner, her frail frame draped in worn, tattered fabric, her once radiant beauty dimmed by years of suffering. And then his eyes fell upon the boy standing beside her. A boy with his eyes. His heart clenched. A storm of emotions crashed over him. Joy, disbelief, guilt, love, so much love. Amina had not been abandoned. He had never forsaken her. The day he left for America, he had sworn to return as soon as he could. But fate had other plans. His parents' tragic deaths had left him drowning in legal battles, fighting against ruthless relatives who sought to strip him of everything. The months turned into years, and every attempt to return to the Philippines was met with another delay, another roadblock. He had sent letters, dozens of them, but none ever reached her. For years he had been trapped in a nightmare, haunted by the woman he had left behind, by the promises he had failed to keep. And now here she was, weaker, tired, but still beautiful. Still the woman he loved. Amina turned, sensing the weight of his gaze before she saw him. Their eyes met. For a moment, time ceased to exist. The world around them disappeared, the marketplace fading into nothing but background noise. She gasped, her breath catching in her throat. Her vision blurred as tears welled in her weary eyes. "James," she whispered, the name foreign on her tongue after all these years. He took a step forward, then another, and before he could stop himself, he was running to her. Amina's lips trembled. Her body swayed as exhaustion threatened to consume her, but she stood her ground. "I knew you would come back," she choked out, voice raw with emotion. "Because you promised me, and I waited." James fell to his knees before her, his shoulders shaking, his breath ragged. "My love," he sobbed, reaching for her hands, pressing them to his lips. "I searched for you, I wrote to you. I never stopped looking." Her fingers curled around his, weak but steady. Then, James turned his gaze to the child standing beside her, his son, the son he never knew he had. Ibrahim stared at him, uncertain, his young mind struggling to comprehend what was unfolding before him. James swallowed the lump in his throat. Slowly, cautiously, he reached out. "Ibrahim," he whispered. "My son." The boy hesitated, then looked up at his mother. Amina nodded, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. Ibrahim stepped forward. And when James pulled him into his arms, the dam of emotions broke. "I am so sorry," James whispered against his son's hair. "I will never leave you. Never again." Amina sank to the ground beside them, her body trembling from years of carrying the weight of loneliness. James reached for her, pulling her close, holding both mother and child as if anchoring himself to them. The marketplace, once filled with whispers of judgment, now stood in silent awe. Amina had been right all along. James had come back, and this time he would never let go. Determined to right the wrongs of the past, James vowed to give Amina the life she had always deserved. He would not allow another moment of her life to be spent in suffering, nor would he let their son grow up without the dignity and comfort he was entitled to. He used every resource at his disposal, sparing no effort to restore her honor and ensure that the world recognized her worth. Word of their story spread like wildfire, capturing the hearts of people from all walks of life. The once scorned woman, abandoned to the streets with her child, had not only survived, but had been reunited with the man who had never stopped loving her. Their love story, marked by separation, hardship, and an unyielding promise, became a symbol of faith and devotion. Then came the wedding that made history. It was an event unlike anything the Philippines had ever seen. The grand cathedral was adorned with the finest white and gold tapestries, its aisles lined with fragrant sampaguita and roses. The sound of ethereal music filled the air as nobles, governors, and world leaders gathered, eager to witness the momentous union of two souls who had defied fate itself. Amina, once an outcast, stripped of dignity, now stood as the most radiant bride the country had ever known. Draped in an elegant golden gown woven with delicate embroidery that shimmered like the first light of dawn, she was a vision of grace and resilience. The veil that once symbolized her shame had been replaced by a crown of honor, and by her side stood Ibrahim, her son, his small hands clutching the sleeve of her dress as he beamed with pride. James, dressed in a crisp ceremonial uniform adorned with medals of honor, stood at the altar, his heart pounding with anticipation. As Amina walked toward him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears, he felt his breath hitch. She was no longer just the woman he had once met under the golden hues of the Mindanao sunset. She was his destiny, his forever. When they finally stood before each other, hands intertwined, James gazed into her warm, tearful eyes and whispered, "I should have never left you. But today, I vow to spend the rest of my life making it up to you." Amina smiled, her lips trembling as she whispered back, "I waited, James, because I knew you would come." As they exchanged vows before the world, their love, tested by time, faith, and suffering, became a legend, a testament to the power of an unbreakable promise. A new beginning. 8 weeks later, James took Amina and Ibrahim to Phoenix, Arizona, where a new life awaited them. The sprawling house he had prepared for them sat on the edge of the desert, where the golden hues of the setting sun mirrored the warmth of the land Amina had left behind. The vast blue sky stretched endlessly above them, painting the world in a palette of fire and gold. It was a world different from the shores of Davao, yet beneath its sky she felt safe, loved, and whole. Their home was filled with laughter and love. Ibrahim, once a boy who knew only hardship, now had everything a child could wish for: warmth, security, a father who adored him, and a mother who had fought against fate itself to protect him. One evening, as the desert breeze whispered through the open windows, James and Amina sat beneath the vast Arizona sky, its canvas illuminated with 1,000 twinkling stars. He pulled her close, inhaling the soft scent of her hair, the warmth of her body against his. "Thank you for waiting," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Amina looked up at him, her heart swelling with love. "I would wait 1,000 lifetimes if it meant finding my way back to you." And so, their love, once battered by time and distance, became eternal, a story that would be passed down through generations, a love that had survived the impossible, proving that a promise kept is the most powerful force of all. Finally, are you planning to travel to the Philippines, Southeast Asia, or anywhere else in the world and looking for the cheapest airline tickets? Don't let high travel costs hold you back from your dream adventure. Whether you're dreaming of pristine beaches, bustling cities, or cultural escapes, we've got you covered. Start your journey today by finding the best deals on flights. Click on the link below to explore unbeatable prices and make your travel plans a reality. Your next adventure is just a booking away. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. Make sure to tap the notification bell so you're always the first to know when we upload new videos. Thanks for watching. We appreciate your support.